the Caribbean Sea. For centuries, it's been called a paradise, a place of peace, rhythm, and sun. But today, something is unfolding beneath its calm blue waves. Massive warships now prowl the same waters once sailed by cruise liners and fishing boats. From the decks of the USS Gerald R. Ford, the world's most powerful aircraft carrier, fighter jets roar over a sea that has never seen this kind of tension. And so, we asked AI a question that's keeping world leaders awake at night. Is the Caribbean ready for a US-Venezuela war? AI's answer: the Caribbean isn't ready because it's already in the crossfire. The drums of war in a zone of peace. Once, this region was proudly known as a zone of peace. But in late 2025, that peace began to fracture. A US naval armada, aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, has turned the Caribbean into a front line. Officially, Washington calls it a war on narco-terrorism. But to Caribbean observers, the scale feels much larger. A show of force meant to corner Venezuela's government and control the hemisphere's energy future. AI's assessment is blunt. What you're seeing isn't counter-narcotics, it's pre-positioning for regime change. The warships aren't far away. They're in waters shared by our region, and the Caribbean's carefully built reputation as a neutral sea of trade and tourism is at risk of being shattered overnight. Roots of hostility: oil, power, and pride. To understand how we reached this moment, AI turned back through history. The hostility didn't start yesterday. It began more than a century ago, when oil and ideology collided. For decades, Venezuela supplied the fuel that kept America's economy running. But when Hugo Chávez took power in 1999, everything changed. He nationalized oil fields, expelled US military advisors, and launched PetroCaribe, giving small Caribbean nations cheap oil in exchange for friendship. For many, it was liberation from dependency. For Washington, it was defiance. When Chávez died, Nicolás Maduro inherited a collapsing economy and a target on his back. Hyperinflation, hunger, and sanctions followed. And when the US stopped recognizing Maduro's presidency in 2019, relations collapsed completely. Now, with both nations entrenched, AI says the conflict has entered a new and unpredictable phase, one where the Caribbean itself could become collateral damage. The new escalation: war on drugs or pretext for power. Since mid-2025, US carrier groups have operated just off Venezuela's coast. More than 10,000 troops, nuclear submarines, B-52 bombers, drones launched from Puerto Rico. The official justification? To dismantle transnational cartels. But international data shows Venezuela isn't a key drug route to the US, not for cocaine, not for fentanyl. AI calls it out plainly. The evidence does not support the stated mission. The operation aligns more closely with pressure for political overthrow, and yet strikes have begun. Civilian vessels destroyed, fishermen dead. Even the United Nations has condemned them as extrajudicial killings. This isn't just military posturing. It's the slow normalization of undeclared war. And AI warns the rules of war are being rewritten right in the Caribbean Sea. Voices of warning. Former Caribbean leaders break their silence. When danger rises, the elders speak. In October 2025, 10 former Caribbean prime ministers, from Jamaica's PJ Patterson and Bruce Golding to Barbados's Freundel Stuart and St. Lucia's Kenny Anthony, issued a historic joint statement. They warned that the buildup of nuclear vessels in regional waters could pull the Caribbean into conflicts not of our making. They reminded the world that the Caribbean has always been a zone of peace, and that international law, not military might, must prevail. Their message was firm. No country in the region should host foreign military assets that threaten that peace. AI's reaction? These leaders understand that the Caribbean's greatest defense is its unity and its moral authority. The human cost of war. If war breaks out, the first casualties won't be soldiers. They'll be families, workers, and refugees. A war would paralyze the Caribbean's shipping routes, drive oil prices through the roof, and devastate tourism. The fishing villages that dot our coasts could vanish overnight. Each small boat, once a symbol of livelihood, could be mistaken for an enemy craft. Meanwhile, millions more Venezuelans could flee, overwhelming islands like Trinidad, Aruba, and Curacao. AI estimates the humanitarian fallout could be the largest refugee wave in modern Caribbean history. The Caribbean Sea, AI warns, could become a highway of despair when war hits the water. And then comes the invisible damage, the kind that lasts for decades. Missile strikes could rupture Venezuela's oil infrastructure, unleashing spills that poison reefs and beaches. Naval sonar and explosions could kill dolphins and whales by the thousands. And in the chaos, smugglers and arms dealers would thrive, flooding small islands with illegal weapons. AI's summary is chilling. A single conflict in the Caribbean could undo 40 years of progress in security, environment, and regional cooperation. The diplomatic crossroad. CARICOM now walks a tightrope. It cannot afford to alienate Washington, yet it cannot betray its founding principle: peace through dialogue. Foreign ministers have already written to the US government, calling for restraint and consultation. But AI warns, diplomacy only works if it's unified. The moment Caribbean states divide, the zone of peace collapses. And so, as US jets shadow Venezuela's coast, the Caribbean faces its greatest diplomatic test since independence. 5 steps to survive the storm. AI proposes 5 urgent measures. Number 1. Speak with one voice. Demand an emergency UN Security Council session to reaffirm the Caribbean as a zone of peace. Number 2. Energy independence. Build renewable reserves to reduce reliance on imported oil. Number 3. Refugee readiness. Empower SEDEMA and CARICOM to coordinate shelters, food, and medical aid. Number 4. Maritime coordination. Strengthen Coast Guard collaboration to protect, not provoke. Number 5. Protect the brand. Launch a unified tourism campaign that separates the Caribbean image from war headlines. AI ends this section with clarity. The Caribbean survival will depend not on firepower, but foresight. Bonus facts. 4 things you didn't know about the US-Venezuela crisis. 1. Oil paradox. Venezuela has more oil than any other country on Earth, but its citizens queue for gasoline. 2. Economic warfare. Analysts estimate US sanctions have caused more civilian deaths than bullets. 3. Tourism shock. Nearly 40% of cruise routes cross potential conflict zones. 4. Quiet diplomacy. Some Caribbean leaders are mediating in secret, fearful of US retaliation if they speak publicly. AI's final verdict? The Caribbean cannot escape geography, but it can choose its destiny. The region stands between 2 great powers, one armed with missiles, the other with oil, and both fighting to shape the hemisphere. But the Caribbean's power lies in peace, in diplomacy, in oneness. Because if this sea ever becomes a battlefield, no island will stay untouched. So, we ask again, is the Caribbean ready for a US-Venezuela war? AI's answer echoes across the water. Only if it stands together. Please subscribe to this channel, Impacting Jamaica, and join those defending the Caribbean's right to remain a zone of peace.